It's only the beginning. I was ready to start secondary school at this point. Sure, a lot of you are thinking either, oh, school, or oh, school, no. The jump from primary to secondary school is massive. You are, in a way, grieving. Again, coming back to grief, you are grieving and understanding that the school you're in before won't be the same school that you're going to. You may have gone to a different school from peers. You may have friendships may have changed and severed, and new ones formed. There's a lot of different changes going on. Who and still is, even though I'm better at it now, finds change really difficult, really overwhelming. Makes me incredibly anxious. And by this point, I think it had been a year without Barbara, or maybe less. But I was starting a new secondary school and also felt like I was still dealing with grief. And actually, I don't think it was a year. I think it was a lot less than that. I remember sitting in this big hall that felt huge on the wooden floor and having I think the head teacher speaking to us all first and explaining about the school and welcoming everyone and doing all those things that the head teachers do and going through the rules and everything else. And I had a little photo of Barbara in my wallet that was in my pocket, and it was a way of me trying to navigate through having something familiar. I still felt confused as I did before. That hadn't gone away. I still felt a bit lost. I felt more angry than I did when I started secondary school in terms of the feelings of grief. And I felt more angry because I remember thinking, why did she have to die? And I also remember feeling angry because of the faith I was brought up in. So my family were and are very strong Catholics. They have very strong faith. They're not the kind that would shove it down people's throats, and they're not the kind that used it to as an excuse, I suppose, for hate or intolerance or not understanding. But they have strong faith. And I was brought up in that. And I was angry at this point because I remember thinking, if this God that all my family believe in and that is up there is so loving and kind and all of those things and loves everybody, why has he taken away Barbara? Why hasn't he given Barbara more time? Why was she given the time she was? And there are other people that have more time. Why can't she have that? So there's a lot of anger running through me. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of anxiety. There's all these things going on. And not long after I started secondary school, someone that I was friends with in secondary school, that I'm not going to name to keep anonymity for this person and to just be kind, because I'm not naming names for some people out of respect. This friend of mine lost his dad very suddenly, very quickly, very unexpectedly, in a very traumatic way. And at the time, I was very close to this friend. So I tried to support, help, just be there for this friend through this absolutely unimaginable trauma and huge trauma. And all my family did. A lot of friends did. Now, at this time, as I said, I was still trying to understand and get through the death of Barbara. And I remember thinking in my head, okay, I'm trying to understand that. But now I've got this friend who is going through a hugely traumatic time, losing their father. I need to park. I need to put my grief to one side to be there for this friend. And I did that. So I put my grief on pause. I put it to the back of my mind. Now, I'm going to say, as I said at the start of this book, in the sort of introduction, I suppose you could call it, I'm not saying any of this. I'm not writing any of this. I'm not putting any of this down out there for people to read, to do as a woe me thing. And that is definitely the case with this. I'm not saying I part my grief so people feel sorry for me. I'm just saying that's what I did. Because when you're grieving, and another grief comes along very quickly, or another traumatic experience, you kind of have to do that. Because if you take another one on while you're dealing with the one before, you will very easily break. You will very easily break. So I was trying to do all that. Meanwhile, my family was still in grief for Barbara as well. And I sensed that. And we had the funeral for my friend's father. The funeral took place at a local church. And it was the first of many that I would start to see Barbara's coffin before I saw the person's funeral I was at. I remember giving out the funeral, the order of service for the funeral at the back of the church as people came in. And I remember having to think, I need to keep myself together. Bearing in mind, I was only 13 at this time, but I need to keep myself together to make sure that I am being strong for everybody around me, that I'm being strong for my friend that I'm supporting, and also I'm being strong because I'm one of the first people that anyone will see walking into church, because they'll come and get an order of service booklet from me or my friend who was on the other side of this entrance. And that was a theme that started to become more and more prevalent within me as time went on, and you'll you'll read about as you read further into this book. And then as the funeral started and the coffin came down the church, I remember going into this mode of, I'm going to try and pretend I'm not here as much as possible. Now, as I said in this book before, however people deal with grief, as long as it's not hurting them or those around them, that's absolutely fine. But in the long run, pretending or blocking yourself out to where you are in that experience does more harm than good. So I suppose that's another reflection about grief. If we're going to do another reflection, and especially on funerals, when you're in those funerals, if you block out where you are, it comes back to haunt you down the line, whether it's months, years, weeks, however it might be. And that can be really damaging. But I didn't know that at the time. So there I was, 13-year-old me, 14-year-old, I think, I can't remember, one of the two, standing in this church in the pews. Now, this church that the funeral was at was the same church that Barbara's funeral was at. It's a very big church in my hometown. Very high ceilings, big pillars, quite a big altar. And the aisle coming down the church is quite long. And as the coffin came down in the funeral, I saw Barbara's first. And all those feelings that I felt before with Barbara came flooding back. The fear, the anxiety, the anger, the confusion, all of those came back. And then after I saw Barbara, I was back in the room for a minute and I saw my friend's father's coffin. And I saw the family behind that. And I just did, as I said before, then went into, I'm not here. I'm going to, look like I'm present, and I will react to some of the things around me. So if there's a certain song, I will cry. There's certain points I will cry. But I'm not here. Because in my head, if I'm here, I'm back at Barbara's again. And I don't want to do that again. As I said before, in my last chapter, the wakes were really hard as well. And this wake was just as hard. Because again, I was back in, for a split second, the wake for Barbara, before I then came back into the room and the wake for my friend's dad, sorry. And it became overwhelmingly difficult. And this was the first time as well the phrase started to go around that I started to take notice of more of, aren't you glad you had them for as long as you did? And it's a phrase I heard at Barbara's. Aren't you glad we had that time? Aren't you glad we had her? Now again, years later, through lots of different therapy, I understand it better. Though it's still a phrase I find really, really hard, and sometimes I get really, really angry about. And at the time, I didn't understand it fully. I obviously hadn't been to therapy and years hadn't passed. So I started to hear this phrase and I started to sort of dwell on it and think about it and think, well, no, I'm not glad. And that sounds awful, doesn't it? I'm not glad. And many of you may be reading this and think, how can you not be glad you had time with somebody? But when I was younger, I started to get really, really frustrated and angry with that phrase because I thought, I'm not glad because I want more time. Because it's not fair, because they were taken quite suddenly. Now, Barbara was, as I said before, ill for a long time. We all knew she was going to die. But to me, it still felt traumatic. It still felt like somebody had, and whoever might be up there, however it might look, had gone and clicked their fingers and snuffed out the light, whatever you want to call it, and just taken this person from me. It felt very quick and very sudden, even though I knew it was coming. And the same with my friend's dad. I remember thinking, they've gone really quickly too. And they were felt like very traumatic periods of grief that I went through. So after the funeral of my friend's father, I then went back to thinking about Barbara. I was still there for my friend, but I started to then go, right, I need to grieve Barbara a bit more because I felt like I didn't have that time. And that's the thing about grief, and it's another reflection. And even though we've talked about time, it's also giving yourself that time. Because a lot of the time with grief, with death and with loss, people almost go, I now need to live for them. I need to live for the moment because they didn't get those moments. That means I need to be making sure that I am going out and I'm doing things and I'm traveling and I'm making these memories and these experiences and all of that. And yes, they're important. And yes, you never know what's going to happen next. And yes, I agree with that. But actually, we need to all allow ourselves to just have time. And if that means we need time to sit with that grief and we need time to just cry, and I'm talking about grown men here, cry, then give us that time. And when I say give us that time, I mean give ourselves permission to have that time. Sit, let those feelings wash over and be with those feelings. And it doesn't mean you have to then be going, I'm going to live for the moment because I've lost this person. That does not have to be the case. And I can tell you right now, from all of my grief that I've been through, I have only had moments like that very rarely. I very rarely do I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to live for the moment and I rarely do it, and I should do it a bit more, but I rarely do. But that's okay. If you are not that person, that's okay. There's often a quote that goes around that swirls around on social media, which is living my best life. And it's a quote that I really, 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 really cannot stand. Because number one, everybody's best life is different for them. Barbara's best life was different for my best life. Living your best life is so vastly different. And there's this persona again, this perception that we need to be doing loads of stuff because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and blah blah blah. And it's true, we don't know. But just because somebody's passed away, somebody's died, you've lost somebody, it doesn't mean you have to do those things. It means you can just be as you need to be. Now, going back to after my friend's father's funeral, I was grieving Barbara, though I didn't still understand it. And in my young head, I went, right, I've done 2 funerals very close to each other. It's okay. Because I'm not going to lose anyone else anytime soon. A bit of a silly thought after 2. You'll find out on the next chapter.